Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the final webinar in Regenerate Outcomes Winter Webinar Series. I'm Matt Jordan, one of the team at Regenerate Outcomes, and really pleased to be joined by an excellent panel this evening. Also, really delighted to be hosting this webinar in partnership with Pasture for Life, and so glad to be joined by Nikki, one of the Pasture for Life team, and she'll say a few words about PFL at the start of her presentation, and also Angus Nelless, who's a PFL member. So the format for this evening is that each of the panelists is going to speak for around 10 minutes. The evening will be chaired by Stuart Johnson, who's one of the farmers in the Regenerate Outcomes programme and also part of the mentoring team at Understanding Ag, who we work with quite closely. So each will speak for 10 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to a discussion chaired by Stu. So as you go along, if you've got any questions based on what the panelists are saying or based on things you'd like to hear more about on the topic of outwintering over the last winter or kind of comparisons between this year and the year before and so on, then please be sticking those in the Q&A function or the chat, and Stu will pick those up when we get to the discussion section. Before I pass over to Stu, I'll just say a few words by way of introduction to Regenerate Outcomes. So Regenerate runs a soil health programme for British farmers. There's two main parts to what that entails. The first is a mentoring programme run with Understanding Ag, and then the second is soil carbon baselining and remeasurement. So we follow in the farm's progress improving soil health through that measurement system to generate verified carbon credits for farmers in the programme as well, which can either be kept used in the supply chain or sold for additional revenue. We deliver all our services at no upfront cost, and farmers are able to leave at any time. And as I mentioned, this is the last in our winter webinar series, but we're also running some soil health workshops this summer with Understanding Ag, one each in England, Wales and Scotland. You can find more details about those on our website, and we'll also send out some details of those to everybody who signed up to the webinar this evening. So if you'd like to come along to a couple of intensive days, deep dive on soil health, please consider coming along to one of those workshops. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Stu, who'll kick us off with the first presentation.
Hi everyone, can you hear me all right there, Matt?
Yeah, perfect.
And I'll try and share my screen here. So I've got a few slides here. It's not quite as exciting as grazing through the summer, usually winter grazing. So there's not as many exciting photos here, I'm afraid, to show you all. Can you see up there?
Yeah, perfect.
Are they all right? Right. Okay. Grand, everyone. So yeah. So we've been out wintering for quite a few years now. It's something that we have quite a bit of experience at, successfully and unsuccessfully over the years. The one thing that I like to sort of come at this from is that there's obviously varying different methods of outwintering, and we have gone through numerous ones. So I try and categorise them. Over the years, with experience of all of them, I've tried to categorise them as we go. Utilising Understanding Ag 634, one of the things that we talk about is the compounded results of what we do. Now we can outwinter in many different ways, and we've done all three of these here so far. When we've used these, we've found that these have been quite negative compounding results that we've found off the back of these. A lot of them necessitated reseeds, spends afterwards, flat lifting, ploughing, that sort of stuff. So these ones here, the set stocking with the silage and sacrifice field, that is obviously sticking some feeders in the field and leaving the cattle where they are. And we've used that numerous times over the years. That was predominantly what we used to use. That necessitates a lot of reseeds, a lot of time spent at the end of that. Strip grazing forage crops, we used to use that a lot as well. And we were doing that a lot of the time with forage crops after arable, and then putting bales in as well, and then bale grazing on arable stubbles with no forage crops and putting bales across them, much like you would with a sacrifice field. All three of these necessitated a lot of cost at the end of them, and so we've dramatically moved away from this, trying to avoid this as much as possible. Moving on to the next ones, we've kind of got the strip grazing, deferred grazing. So that's leaving grassland shut up from sort of July on, which is what we tend to do at our place.
Stu, would you mind just chucking your slides on full screen just so people can get a bit of a better look?
Oh, I think they are full screen at my end. Are they not full screen for you?
No, we're still seeing the kind of editing view.
Oh, hang on a second then. Sorry, everyone. This is my technical knowledge here coming to me, Fred. Okay, bear with. Okay, that one. Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to work. Yeah, it's not.
If you just jump onto slideshow, the slideshow tab along the top.
Yeah, is that there? So that's full screen on mine there now.
All right, well, not to worry. We'll just crack on then.
Yeah, sorry, everyone. That's not going to fly now, I'm afraid. So yeah, so we used a lot of these ones here that had a lot of positive and negative combined results. Strip grazing on deferred grassland, when we're not back fencing, we're moving along, and we are moving the cattle forwards with the fence and moving the fence along every day, rather than into little cells. We found that had good results, but we did find again that it left a lot of compacted soil afterwards, trailing back to water sources, that sort of thing. And then we did bale grazing on deferred grassland, which again has some really positive results. It can leave negative ones when you get the weather goes against you, sort of thing. Or if we set out our stall, we were going to bale graze, and we can get pretty rough up on the top sometimes. So I'm sure that the same with everyone else, but on those bad days, that when the weather comes in, it can be pretty sorrowful. So yeah, we try not to bale graze unless we are going to bale graze when the weather's on our side. So if it's on our sides, I'll take some bales out. And I know a lot of people have a lot of success. A lot of our land's quite light, not light, sorry, quite thin grass. It can be thin topsoils. So we used to break through that quite badly if we're not careful. So I like to try and graze on grassland that's when the weather's on our side. So let me go on a bit. I don't know what I've done there. It's going down. There we go. Sorry. So yeah, so I found the most positive results at my place, and I'm sure that everyone else will have different stories themselves. The most positive ones we found is this sort of 6 and 7 options where we're deferred amp grazing on grass and utilising bale grazing as and when the weather's on our side. So if it's frosty, I like to call it, I'll go and steal a day. If it's maybe not on our side, I'll just keep moving them day to day, and then find that that's the best results that we get. I try as much as I possibly can to sort of steer between this fully deferred grassland grazing and bale grazing in between the two. I like to think that we get the best results that way, that we have tall grasses that allow us to do those. So the positives, I guess, what are the positives that we found of bale grazing? Obviously, the financial one's the one we're really looking at mostly. On a financial level, I did some rough maths before. I've been sort of quoting £2.80 a day, and I think it's actually worse than that when we factor in the shed depreciation and machinery replacement costs and all that sort of stuff. So when we've got them in the shed, I'm kicking £2.50 a day just in the variable costs, which is pretty substantial these days. So on a financial level, if we can keep those keep them outside as long as possible, we're finding that we're sub 50p a day, which is good, including all our time, including the minerals that's going out to them, and including feeding bales on average maybe once a week when the weather's on our side. So what, purely on a financial level, if we're not looking at any other benefits that go with this, the finances sort of stack up to sort of clicking £2 a day per head. So we had 190 something cattle outside this year till February. So if we're clicking that £2 a day, that's sort of £380 every day that we can keep clicking on our side. When we're talking about enterprises that have been historically, short-term historically have been very marginal enterprises, that's really important in terms of how can we go from an unprofitable enterprise into a profitable one. So if we can keep these cattle outside as long as possible, like I say, on a purely financial level, the dividends sort of pay for themselves very rapidly. Our environmental gains that we're seeing, we're seeing longer rest periods are great for building the soil aggregates. So the key to sort of outwintering is earning the right. We need to earn the right to outwinter. So it's very unlikely. I have written a blog on this, so I'm kind of scooting over this because I'm very aware that Nikki and Gus are going to have a lot more interesting things that some of you might not have heard before. So I'm trying to scoot over mine very quickly here. So I have written a blog on this, which is available through Regenerate Outcomes. If some of this is sort of interesting to you, you can read it on there. But for me, the key to this whole thing is earning the right to outwinter, and earning the right means that we need to build some aggregates in that soil. Most soils that we go to now to stick a shovel in don't have those aggregates. So on a very, very basic level, aggregates mean resilience, which means we can keep them out as long as possible. The grass that's coming provides brilliant habitat for wildlife in there. Again, coming at it from a financial point of view, that's not obviously the first reason that we do this for, but it really is quite a rewarding one. There's a picture down here. I'm sure you're not able to see it with this terrible little camera that I'm using, I'm afraid, but there's a picture down here, and there's a little kestrel here. So when we're moving the cows in the morning or in the evening, the cows will the kestrel comes over and obviously comes in to get the free meal. Now, the kestrel's a really good indicator species that we've got a functioning ecosystem there, because the kestrel's the sort of visual sign that we see a lot of the time that things are functioning underneath there. So it's a really beneficial for us to see those, but also it's really good on a wildlife perspective that we're allowing that sort of habitats to be created. People talk about creating habitat in a mosaic approach, which is fantastic. I think that's really good for building habitat where there's not much. I would like to think that well-managed long tall grass grazing with lots of biodiversity in can be every bit as much habitat and biodiversity as the mosaic approach, as people call it. So if we can sort of focus on having our grassland every bit as available to that wildlife, then we're hopefully going to have it right across the farm rather than just mosaic approach. So it's really important that we focus on that as well. Another environmental thing that we're going to see is enhanced nutrient cycling. We're going to have, grow it, graze it, and defecate it back down in the same spot. That's fantastic. We're seeing that where we're reducing all fertilizer usage across the farm by stimulating stimulating these nutrient cycling along with the biology in the soil. We're laying fertilizer in the form of the manure straight down where it came from, and then we are hopefully enhancing the biology. We're going to lower the carbon footprint. Because we're not hauling silage across everywhere. Now, there's obviously a big debate about the methane emissions and all that sort of stuff as to whether it is. And the cow seems to get villainized a little bit. For anyone who's sort of still on that chain of thought, I would recommend you go and watch Roots So Deep, which is a fantastic documentary that sort of compares the AMP grazing style and the set stocking. So what we're trying to do is trying to earn the right to keep our animals out as long as possible, and this documentary really highlights the benefits of everything that goes alongside that. We're going to have lower ammonia and methane emissions. Again, that goes back to these documentaries. Housing manure decomposes anaerobically, so it's pretty it can be pretty bad. But the stuff that we're having outside in the field is literally as nature intended it. There's nothing more natural than the cows being outside. It's where they're meant to be, and that manure coming out of the animal is in the perfect form that is going to respond well and with the soils and really go from there. And there's less risk of pollution from manures and slurries. So we had an incident last year where there was we had to move manure out of the shed when we had cattle in the shed, and we couldn't get anywhere because it was so wet. So we had to stack it on the side of an old road, and then there was some people saying, well, there's muddy water going down the road, so we had to shift it again. And they're absolutely right. There was stuff going down there, so we shifted it into a better spot. But when your back's up against it in the wet and you have to sort of manage the system, you sometimes sort of fall down in that sense. So when we're getting it straight out of the animal, we're not creating a huge amount of manure. We're not creating a huge amount of slurry that's coming out of there. It's like I said before, it's coming straight out of the animal in the perfect form, and that's how it should be. So if we can keep them outside as long as possible, we're going to massively reduce our environmental footprint and our creation of this manures and slurries. Cattle, better health. They calve better, they improve mobility from exercise. If they're out there walking all the time, we've found the longer we can keep them out, they're actually easier our calving sessions are. So we kept them out this year till February, and we're now 100 in of calving, and we've probably only touched about 3 or 4. So it's been a hugely beneficial for us in terms of a less stressful calving. The cattle themselves have got much lower stress levels. They've got much improved temperament when we're in amongst them all the time, and moving fences, they get very much used to you. So the cattle themselves are much better. Feet-wise, they're a lot better inside than outside than they are inside. I don't know if anyone notices, but if you get a little bit of infection in the shed, it can rip through them all. That's very unlikely to happen when we keep them outside. So we're seeing improved feet right through our herd, which is really important. And we've seen less disease and interventions when outside. So we kept our heifer calves outside this year with the cows, so they could learn to become cows outside and understand what it was going to take for them to be, in our herd and fit our system. So we've seen a lot less disease and interventions with those cattle, and when they are kept outside with the mothers, which is really good, which is positive. I've got some key takeaways here. I'm aware there's a few questions coming in about my situation. I probably should have informed you all a little bit more, which I'll run through it very briefly now. We are a livestock farm, growers are on arable, but we're mainly cattle and sheep. We are outwintering. We've experimented with numerous things over the years. The main cattle breed that we used to have was the continental style cattle, dairy breds continentals, and we've shifted now into stabilizer breeds just to make sure that they are more suited to the climate that we have here and how we want to move them in the system. We try and keep things out as long as possible. We still bring them in for calving, and traditionally would start calving last week of January into February. This year it was sort of the middle to end of February, and we'll keep pushing that back, I think, as we maneuver in our system that allows us to be slightly more in line with nature, shall we say. So if we can keep pushing that back ever so slightly, I think we'll move to a more outwintered full-time calving back outside again sort of system is the long-term goal. That's probably sums up what we're doing. There'll be more questions later on. So for my climate, everyone's different. This is, for me, my key takeaways that I've got to sort of people is choose your fields early. If we're not earned the right through proper management or beneficial management, say, building aggregates in the soil, try and choose your dry ones. You use them for our winter around first. We've had a lot of success down by the river when we had not earned the right at all. And that was sort of in those early years, we could outwinter down on those gravelly, sandy bits. And we've since moved a lot of the outwintering away from that now, since we've sort of built the aggregates further afield on top of the hills now. So we sort of used our dry spots as a buffer while we earned the right to get up into the higher points. One of the things that I've learned over the last 24 months especially is to save our sheltered areas. So when we are out wintering, the weather's going to go against us definitely at times. It's going to come in horribly. What I tend to do is if I've got a nice sheltered spot next to wood, I'll just skip that pasture and I'll save it for that paddock, and I'll save it for when I need it later on in the season. So invariably we do get a lot of rain where we are, so we'll need that pasture probably within a week. They very rarely go a week or two without a lot of rain here, so especially through the winter. So we'll like to make sure that we have the sheltered areas for when we need them is what we're trying to do. Try to be selective about when you supplementary feed. That's your silage again. Like I said before, on a deferred system, we find that's the best. I think there's a stage as you go through when you learn sort of how to manage the cattle outside. And I think that the supplementary feeding is something that has massive benefits in terms of laying down manure, laying down that stockpile, laying down the biology all in one area. But we can get caught out with that when we sort of set out our stall that we're going to do that right from day one. In terms of our place, especially, we take silage out when it's on our side, and we try and make sure that we don't get caught out by putting bales out too early. So when I'm shutting up fields, I like to shut up the long sort of matured stuff. I sort of June, July onwards, if in an ideal world, and then every now and then it's not feasible, obviously, but that's what we'll try and do. Make sure that we'll put them onto the mature permanent pastures is what we're looking for. Sort of November onwards, end of November onwards. We get a much better aggregation in there. We've got much more biomass, much more mature, more lignified stuff. I think some of the younger silagey grasses that we use, like the rye grasses and the herbal lays, when they're a young herbal lay, they can not have enough basal cover in the bottom, perhaps. So we find that we want to try and get off those fields by November and get onto our permanent pastures for the rest of the winter. Here's the plan. And that seems to suit our area pretty well for making sure that we're not making a mess that needs to be repaired. My whole goal, I should have said this earlier on, my whole goal is to make sure when we go through the winter, I don't have to go back in and spend any time or money on reseeds and fiddling around. Now, we've done that for years, where we would sacrifice fields, or we would spend spend a month in the spring rectifying all the problems that we made. Now, in my eyes, that is not financially a great way to do it. I don't know if you would say that on a environmental level, that's a huge success either. So for me, the real success is getting through the winter without necessitating any form of reseeding or time spent reseeding. So that's one of my main goals. We've done it the last 2 years. No reseeding afterwards, which was a real challenge last year in the wet. This year, and I'm sure you'll hear from the other two as well, has been an exceptionally simple winter compared to what we went through last year. So yeah, we've had a lot of things that have gone our way. It's been really favourable, and it's made life a lot easier. I remember when they came in last year, I was kind of at the end of my time with them being outside and thought, I'm ready for them to come in now. It only took 2 or 3 days in the shed before I realised why I hated them being in the sheds. But obviously that's a very short memory. So yeah, forgot about that. One of the main things that I find in our climate in the UK here, a lot of people talk about, let them walk back to water. They don't need water. That, for me, you've got to keep the water to them in this environment. We're a very, very moist climate, and we don't get hard frosts, which a lot of other countries will talk about. In this climate, especially, we need to make sure that we keep that water trough to them, so they're not trailing back across the field and pugging up the same area over and over again, or compacting the area. Keep that water to them, and they're going to find that we're going to find that those cattle are they're either not just a lot more content, but they're not going to start walking back and forth over the same area. And that's, to me, is one of the keys the keys to the whole thing, is to making sure that we get into an area, we utilise that area, and we get back out again and make sure we're not creating any damage going forward. Another one that's really key for me is moving day. So last year I was moving up to 3 times a day on those really wet days. 15 minutes extra per move, 20 minutes extra. I'd still sooner do that than having in the shed. On a financial level, if nothing else, but actually on a we've gone through those other benefits, the health to the animals and the complexities that come with having in a shed. So if we can keep them outside, even if that means moving them twice, thrice if needed, it's still time really well spent in my eyes. Yeah, keep them moving, get onto that paddock, get them off again, and make sure we don't make too much mess. Sorry, that they need to be doing any repairs. Lastly, it's a very long game. We've got to earn the right over time. I don't think that we're going to go straight into this and you're going to be able to, magically keep them through. The key is to sort of earn the right by in those first years. Biomass is huge. Biomass is a huge benefit, shall we say? If we can just build up enough biomass to get through the shoulders, shall we say. So if we can extend that grazing season in the back end, that's a great start. And then as we start to amp graze and maneuver that through the system, and then we start to build aggregation in the soil throughout the farm, that's when we'll earn the right to outwinter. But let's not try and jump straight in and think we'll manage to do that in the first year or two. It's a really, really slow process of earning the right to make sure we get those aggregates built, and then we don't damage those aggregates when we're out wintering. So I'm very aware that I've gone over my time, and I'm also aware that my slides are not working. So this has been probably not quite as helpful as I hoped it would be. So I will pass over to Nikki, who will no doubt have this running very smoothly. Knowing Nikki.
Thanks, Stuart. I'm just going to get my slide shared. What I would say as I'm doing that is earning the right definitely isn't what we did, because we didn't have a shed. We didn't have any other options. So we just jumped straight into having our cattle outwintered. So yeah, slightly different way of doing things. As Matt said, I'm just going to very quickly talk about Pasture for Life before I dive into So just want to highlight who we are at Pasture for Life. Some of you may well have heard of us. We're an organisation that works across the UK, and we believe that grazing animals power the regeneration of landscapes, economies, food, cultures and communities. And we help farmers harness the power of pasture for the benefit of the natural world, their communities and themselves. And we do that by demonstrating the benefits of grazing animals on pasture. We empower farmers through farmer-to-farmer learning, and we grow the market for products and natural capital certified producers generate. And a lot of our work is around membership and community, but also knowledge creation and exchange. We're developing data capture, insight, mentoring and consultancy. We already obviously deliver our certification and supply chain, and we work, as tonight is a nice example, in partnerships and collaborations very frequently. And our kind of approach is very much about meeting people where they are and helping them to optimize pasture and getting the most from grass. And what I would say is that we're a membership organisation. We have about 1,500 members who will pay to be members, and then about 10,000 people who are kind of supporters who don't pay, but get obviously less access to our work. Out of our 1,500 members, only 160 of those are certified. So often people think certification is what we do, but it's a very small proportion of what we do. And the majority of our work is around knowledge exchange and research, which is what I'm responsible for, among other things, in the organisation. And we're also very, very proud of the fact that we are more than just farmers. About 85% of our members are farmers, but the remainder are butchers, retailers, chefs, vets, academics and others. And we also and about 80% of the team are female. So we're very proud of that, because I think it doesn't necessarily reflect the rest of the sector. So that's something that for us is really important. Great. So I'm going to move on from Pasture for Life and talk a bit about who I am in terms of my grazing business. So this is me and my husband James. We run Grampian Grazers Limited. As of this week, we now have 2,500 hectares under management. It went up by 2,000 hectares on Friday, which is quite exciting. So we're at a very, very exciting opportunity and very exciting place in our business. We're new entrants. We have 100% pasture-fed cattle. We just run cattle, no sheep here, although I seem to have inherited some over the weekend. So that's an interesting new aspect of the business I need to develop my understanding of. Our whole approach is about grazing for biodiversity and soil health, and we work in partnership with landowners to help them achieve their soil health and biodiversity goals. And we have been outwintering for about 6 years now at 450 metres above sea level in the northeast of Scotland. And our current operation is split between Aberdeenshire, so West Aberdeenshire, near Huntly, and Glen Clover in the Angus Glens. And so I'm going to talk very much about this year. This winter that we're still in, because it's there was snow on the tops this morning, and it's going to go down to about -3 tonight. This year has been really easy for us, like seriously easy. So when Matt asked me to take part in this, I was like, well, all I can say is what an easy year it's been, as Stu has already alluded to. But normally we're dealing with, much more challenging weather, long winters, a lot of snow. I mean, this year we only had 4 weeks of snow, which for us is like a real breeze. And we didn't really get down to below -12. So again, like it was easy for us for what we're used to. So it's been it's been an interesting one this year. Last year was a pretty hard winter. There was a lot of rain, which wasn't so bad for us, but it was just we had a lot of groups. So there was a lot of labour involved last year. And this year we made a conscious effort to change that. So in terms of this year, I've got a picture of dog for scale. So this is our kind of autumn grazing. So we don't really think about winter starting until kind of December, although the temperatures up here are obviously much colder in kind of October, November. But I love grazing in October. I just feel like it's the most amazing, beautiful time of year to graze. The cattle are fat. The grass is amazing. It's like the perfect temperature for them. They just fly. They do really, really well at that time of year. And we do a lot of this kind of big groups of strip grazing across quite big hillsides and way to graze grassland schemes. but I don't like in the winter going into anything less than what the pointer is sitting in on the right hand side. So for us, having like a really, really strong stockpile is really important. We have Shetland Galloways and Pedigree Native Angus, so they're all fairly small animals, which means that we get away easily with wintering even on heavy ground. But what I really want is a nice thick sward. I don't ever want to be able to see the soil when I look down into the ground before grazing it. So for us, that's a really important part, and it's about shutting up ground early on. This was mid-November, 18th of November. This was the first snow that we had this year. So it was a little dusting in November, and I thought, oh, here we go, we're going to have snow from November onwards, and then we didn't have any again until the sort of 2nd of January. So again, this is not far from where I took the photo of the dog, but just having nice hairy fat animals on this deferred grass. That's a massive part of what we do is deferring grass, making sure that we've got a really good rotation during the growing season so that we can optimize our kind of the majority of our in-buy. And that means that we can use these kind of more scrubby, distributed kind of around the estate, more interesting mosaic habitats for winter, because they offer so much shelter, and they give the cows a really, really good bellyful because of the diversity of grasses. You can see all that tall stuff in the background is tufted hairgrass. Everyone will tell you it's not palatable, but if you sort of slowly move animals across and you strip graze across it, you get really, the cattle eat it quite happily, and it really does fill them up. It's really good in terms of kind of keeping their rumen going when the temperatures really drop and it gets cold. And then, we kind of went into just this easy cruising winter this year. It really just hasn't been difficult at all. And just making the most of having access to woodlands and trees. And as Stu said, I'm going to come to a minute in a photo of kind of strategically placing bales. So as I said, what we try and do is deferred grazing until, if we can, the 1st of January, ideally. I don't really want to be feeding any bales out before then. I think we fed one bale to one group in November this year, and that was just because we had really, really cold, and then we had like a bit of a freeze thaw, so the snow then goes hard and they can't get through it as easily. So I think we fed one bale to one group in November, but other than that, we were kind of just pushing through. And we do ask a lot of our animals, we expect them to carry on grazing through the snow, but we see really good responses in our calves generation after generation now as a result of doing that. They get fluffier quicker. We keep quite a few of our hides back after they go for slaughter, for our own tanning, and we're seeing thicker hides with new generations coming through. So I think it's having an impact on that genetic adaptation. So I guess this is my point with these photos is just to talk about like the value and the benefit of trees and hedges in the landscape. This picture on the left, so this was really late for us to be putting bales out. This was early October, and we never put bales out this late. Normally all our bales are out, kind of in the summer. The best bale grazing we've ever done is where they came off the back of the baler and then we just left them where they landed and then grazed them out during the winter. But this was, putting bales out in October, just because we hadn't had a chance to get them out earlier because of various things going on. That hedge line that they're against runs east-west. So we've got them on the south side of the hedge so that if we get a gnarly north wind, we can tuck them in behind that. And we actually did that. So they've not long come off that, just in the last week, because actually we just had some really horrible biting north winds that were really cold. So we've been grazing those bales out just very, very recently, so into March. And that's actually something I'd rather do, is buffer the spring. The grass doesn't start growing here until kind of really late April, early May. I mean, we've had bizarre spurts of grass growth this, in sort of February and now here, but that's not normal for us, or it hasn't been up until now. So I'd rather buffer the feed delivery in the spring rather than in the autumn. If I can not feed hay for as long as possible, then that's a win for us, because we never know how long that spring's going to be, and we sometimes get frost and snow in May. So for us it's about having something, not running out in the spring, making sure we've got plenty of feed if we need it. I love this photo in the middle. I just realised, kind of as I was walking up to move some cattle the other week, just the difference that the trees, even trees with no leaves, you can see the frost outside of the trees and no frost within the trees. So just the shelter that you get even when you've got broadleaf trees in the middle of winter with no leaves on them, is amazing. And the photo on the right is just our bull group I mean, it looks quite nice there. It looks quite green, but really rough ground. And I think something I've really learnt this year is how to, I think sometimes we overestimate the dietary requirements of our livestock. And I think particularly in our more native, like small, smaller size, smaller frame, hardy animals that we've been kind of pushing in systems like this for a while. And when I say pushing, I mean kind of really applying that selection pressure. And I think, yeah, sometimes what I've really realised and like lessons from this winter is what they can thrive on. And in the mob grazing WhatsApp group recently, I did a little video where our animals are basically grazing just now, sort of standing hay. I mean, it's yellow, it looks dead. And in the UK, everyone looks at it and is horrified. But if you're in Canada, they'd be like, wow, that's a good stockpile. So I think sometimes we just kind of have like a particular view on what animals need. But if we use our observation skills and we've got very particular kind of approaches to rapid assessment every day. So every single day we're looking at rumen fill, we're looking at dung scores, we're looking at behaviours in the cattle, all of those things, and we're looking at the impact on the ground. All of those things allow us to decide whether or not they're getting what they need. And all of those indicators at the moment are telling us they're doing okay. I'm just going to rattle through these, but yeah, so this was the worst snow that we had this year. This lasted for about 3 weeks, I think. So this would have been in January. And we actually this year, again, really odd for us to be taking bales out in the snow. Normally everything's prepped and out, but we just didn't manage to get that done this year due to other commitments. And what I've learned this year is we've moved animals less this winter than we ever have before. So just happier for them to be in bigger paddocks and then kind of utilising bales in different places to move animals to get impact. So that's been odd because we're a like move every day kind of people. But this winter they've been moving a lot less, and we've been holding them up on areas like bigger areas for longer. And also this year we've been feeding a lot of our bales on end. So we always used to roll all of our bales out, but this year, and this comes from last year, feeding quite a lot out on end in heavy snow and then doing the same this year. And we've actually had some really good results from that. Oh, this is just to show off James's continuous flow trough, which was featured in Farmers Weekly recently. I think I'm more proud of that than he is. But yeah, as you can see, water is going to be a big challenge for us. And I totally agree with Stu. Like the idea of not giving animals water or just letting them eat hay, eat snow, for me is a welfare issue. And I always want to make sure that even if they're not drinking it, that I'm providing water. I think that's really, really important. So this was -9 when I took this photo, and this water's running absolutely fine. So it's just gravity fed out of a burn. It's a 1,000 litre trough. So if anything did go wrong and it froze, we've got 1,000 litres sitting there as a backup, with a 50 mil outflow pipe, just to make sure that if any hay or anything gets in there, it doesn't clog up and freeze, because that's a problem we've had before. So yeah, we just think quite strategically about water. And this is one of the reasons we're moving animals less. And this is the first year we've not had any problems with water at all. Like it's just been an absolute dream. And it's just thinking a bit more strategically, not just about where our bales are, but where we're putting troughs, where we're putting water, so that if we need to, we've got reserves and backup as much as possible. We have 2 places where cattle can access a burn, so that they can get actual water from a burn. And we only would ever use it in absolute emergency when there was nothing else. But yeah, we really aren't kind of keen on them having access to water edges during the winter, because I just think there's real issues around soil loss and them making a mess, and it's not a great look. If you're keeping animals outside all winter, I think you need to make sure that you're respecting that social license, and that particularly if people are driving past, that they don't have anything to kind of complain or worry about. As I said, we've been doing a lot of feeding out on end. So the picture on the left is our Shetland group eating bales on end, and then on the right hand side is some of our Angus cattle eating rolled out hay. And yeah, I mean, I just think bale grains is amazing. It's such an incredible way of feeding hay, and it also gives them a dry lie on that snow. And you know, I don't care about a bit of waste, because it's still going to be cheaper than building a shed and having a tractor. We don't have a tractor, so a bit of wasted hay is nothing really, if it means that they've got a dry lie on snow for a few weeks. Something else that we've been doing, as I said, we've been moving animals less frequently. So you can see here, this bale in the front is one of 8 in a row. And we literally were just like, it was very kind of Canadian style, where you just take the wrap off and you just leave it open. And we were just letting animals have at it like that. So yeah, it's been interesting learning curve. We definitely get more residue like this. But a lot of our hay is species rich. Almost all of our hay actually is species rich, and we get it from donor sites, so that we can use it to help improve the species richness of our pastures. And you can see top right there, some of the seed mix, there's quite a bit of yellow rattle and stuff in there. But I just wanted to touch on this top left is a really crap photo. I'm sorry, but we've been doing a lot of bracken management with bales, and like the results are just incredible. And this was like an area that we'd done like a couple of bales on the previous year. And you can see the green bit is where we'd fed hay out. And it just is amazing how the bracken, like we just literally open up the bales, and the picture on the right is the cattle on that same patch as the left-hand picture, but just with the bales out opened, and there's quite a bit of residual left behind, like residue, but they just trample that in. It acts as a mulch. You've got the disruption to the rhizomes, but you also get a massive seed deposition. And that's the thing that you really need, because it allows the grass to come back. So we've had some amazing results with that over the last few years on fairly small areas, and we're going to be testing it on bigger areas going forward. Yeah, I mean, this was like 3 weeks ago. It's insane. Northeast Scotland, it's just mad that, 3 weeks ago we were just out grazing, no hay. Just top right of that picture, you can see there's a wood, and they can get into that if they need shelter. But yeah, just kind of really having a very relaxed winter this year. It's been lovely. Just in terms of cost, just as a comparison to Stu, the Scottish average just for feed of a spring calving suckler herd, so just for feed on a 180-day winter, is £280 per head. For us, it's £62 per head for a 180-day winter, and that works out at somewhere around 34 pence a day. So yeah, the cost reductions, well, we've not really reduced. We've always farmed like this, but yeah, the ability to reduce cost is phenomenal. And we've been doing, we're going through a serious kind of period of growth in our business, and the only way we can do that is because we're not carrying a load of debt for capital that we can't afford. We're just able to invest all of our money that we can into livestock, and use them to kind of drive the business, rather than investing in things that cost more money to run. And this is a little group of cattle that have just moved to their new home on Friday. So yeah, again, just rolling out bales. You can see what would look like poor quality of that grass. And I think this is what I was alluding to earlier. You can see how like dead most of that looks. They're standing on a bale, and everything around them is grass that's not been, this actual field hasn't been grazed for about 4 years. And it's just, yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I go and see them every day at the moment, because they're just in this field for the next 3 days until we can move them, because we're just dealing with some like biosecurity and quarantine issues because of other animals on the estate, just keeping them nice and separate and just holding them here for a week. And they just look so well, and like I'm giving them bales and they're not eating all of it, and they're just kind of picking through it, and they're quite happy with what they've got. Loads of trees and like interesting places that they can go and get shelter and scratch against. So yeah, for me, it's just kind of having these places that you can winter. Like our whole system is geared around winter. And if we can nail the winter, then we just cruise through the summer, and it's just so easy to kind of get that right if you're getting the winter, if you're making the winter easy for yourself.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nikki. Well, Gus, do you want to finish us off, and then we'll move to a bit of Q&A?
Yeah, no bother at all. I'd just like to second everything that Stuart and Nikki said, really. Yeah, mine's going to be pretty short, I think.
Great. Thank you very much, Gus. So we'll move to
thank you. Good lad. And the other thing is like slides, and that is well beyond my skill set. So since Stuart couldn't work his, there was absolutely no chance of me fumbling my way through it. So you'll just have to put up with my ugly mug, and I'll just talk you through quickly about who I am, where I'm from, what we do. So yeah, Angus Nelless, a farm in mid-Northumberland, with in a 5-member family partnership, mainly along with brother Duncan and me sort of manage this farm, and we're in partnership with my wife, Dunk's wife, and my mum. So yeah, it's been in the family since about 1910, the farm. So yeah, quite a long history of livestock farming in this area. If the type of land we're farming, probably sort of marginal marginal land, Northumberland, Thistley Half, which is a home farm, is quite a decent sort of grazing farm, and then we'll go up to about 1,000 feet with another farm usually, which has got 150 hectare fell on it, which is predominantly where I'll talk about the cow system that we're running at the moment. So yeah, probably about 35 inches of rain a year, pretty heavy ground. So not big rainfall, but yeah, quite challenging ground, I would say. We run, at the minute, we are running 260 cows, which are due to calf in the spring. Flock of a couple of thousand ewes on the place as well. Try and finish most things, but not always everything. We don't force the issue. So I'll give a little bit of history as to how we ended up where we are now with the system running the cows, and it was very much at the start based on finances. If we go back to 2004, which is, I'm sure I'm probably one of the oldest on the webinar tonight. The farm was in a pretty tough place financially. Yeah, we bought the farm in the mid-90s. BSE hit, foot and mouth, everything like that. So yeah, we were under the cosh financially wise. So we joined this group, which is now transformed into a grazing group all these years later, which is a really great thing to see. But it was initially in 2004 set up to help us all find out what our cost of productions were, both with sheep and cattle. And in the initial meeting in 2004, we had a facilitator go around 15 really good suckler farms in Northumberland to try and get an idea of where we were at as a group. So this one person went around, collected all the financials, and we had a meeting at the local pub. And that night, we found out that the average farm within that 15 of us was losing £400 a cow. And that was in 2004. Now, that just showed you what the subsidy system and that allowed the industry to do, and become quite slack and relaxed, in my opinion, about it all. We weren't in a position to let that continue, really. We had a mortgage which we were struggling to pay anyway. We were just starting into farm ourselves, had young families and that. So at that point, we realised we had to make action, have an action plan. And the next year, there was only 8 of us came back to the meeting to do the costings. Because it terrified most people. A lot of people may be in a privileged position where they didn't have to do anything about that, and that was okay. The basic payment scheme was probably helping some people get through, but that wasn't the case for us. So from then on, anyway, it brings us to where we are now, and the things that we've tried to concentrate on the farm. And from that, we changed the genetics of the animals, which was one of the important things. We ran a very, very continental type of heavily muscled herd of cows, which were breeding cattle for the show circuit, which was great at the time. It looked great in the press, but it was an absolute basket case as far as financials go for us in our situation. So the genetics of the herd started to change, and we closed it down. In 2007, I wanted to give Outwintering a go of cows, because I'd seen a bit of it, heard a bit of it, realised that after doing the costs on the cows at the minute, that there was winter overheads and wintering, which was killing the whole job. So in 2007, I set aside 50 acres to create some deferred grazing, and we started in the December. It was right on the roadside, and after 2 weeks, I had a ruined field, a deceased cow, and a very unhappy father. So we pulled the plug on Outwintering in 2007, and it took us 10 years to pluck up courage to have another go. How we came about having another go was we're lucky enough to be able to go in for a neighbouring farm, purchase a neighbouring farm. But one of the things about that farm was there was no steading at all on it, just basically a farmhouse. That was an attraction to us, because I thought then I'd seen enough about Outwintering cows that would give us the idea that we could have a go on this farm doing that. So that's what kick-started us down this route. And from sort of 2017, we've just sort of built up courage and experience over the years, and learned of lots and lots of people about pitfalls and the things we needed to avoid, or things we needed to get better at about outwintering cows. So we've been through a few different systems, a bit like Stuart, started with winter forage crops. We had to go at that. Wasn't for very long. We're never very good arable farmers, so I think that made us very poor forage crop growers as well. Equally so, there was some days when I was looking at the cows on some of this winter crop, and I couldn't bring myself to look at them, never mind what the perception was for other people seeing them. So I thought, if I don't like it, then you know, it's a really difficult one for me to explain to somebody else. So we pulled the plug on winter forage crops, and then started to look at bale grazing. And I think bale grazing's had a huge part to play in where we are now. It's helping us transition probably away from hay altogether one day. There's a great book by Jim Garish called Kicking the Hay Habit, which I read quite a few years ago, and that's always been my goal, to stop making any sort of forage at all. We're not there yet. We're still quite a way off it, if I'm honest, for cows. I think we'll always need a safety net of hay. But I suppose this winter now we've got down to 2 bales of hay per cow for the whole winter, is where we are at now. So that's a combination of bale grazing and stockpiled grass. As far as the cow system will go, a spring calving herd, outwinter, all winter. The cows never ever come in, and they calf outside as well. So they'll either calf on bale grazing or calf on rotation from the 15th of April. Yeah, we are split over 3 holdings, so that is slightly restricts us on mob size of cows, as in we kind of have to have the cow herd fit that farm. Otherwise, we end up doing a lot of running back and forward with cows in the back of trailers and that. So yeah, in an ideal world, I think if we were a ring fence farm, I would run larger mobs. But at the minute, we're running mobs of 100 plus mature cows on 2 of the farms, and then a mob of 50 in-calf heifers on the other one. Yeah, so that's a restriction on that. I would say stockpiling the grass is, for us, is the holy grail to outwintering as far as cost of production goes on the cow side of things. You know, if we're just moving an single strand electric fence every day or every couple of days, then I don't think we can beat that as far as keeping a suppler cow. You know, so now the cows are in a good positive margin. The trade's exceptional, unbelievable at the minute. And if I think 10 years ago, we were seriously thinking about doing away with cows and going to an all sheep system, or virtually all sheep system, because it was really difficult to see a way out of making the cows actually work for us. But now I'm so pleased that we've stuck at it. We've been able to grow the herd from within, and yeah, really positive about the future of suckler beef and sheep, if I'm honest. Like, I think the sheep job, I think just livestock farming in general, really positive about the future. If we go to this winter, what we're doing this winter is the in-calf heifers have never had any supplementary feeding as far as hay goes. They've just been on stockpiled grass all year. One mob of cows have been on stockpiled grass. They started a little bit of bale grazing at weaning time. They finished that, and then they've gone onto the fell. They are on a 120 hectare fell. There's about 115 of them. We're allocating approximately a hectare a day to them. And but last year was the first year that we've used the fell for this, because the farm, we only acquired the farm a year and a half ago where this is. And already after last year, we reckon we've gained 20 days extra grazing on the fell just from the management of last year. So that's pretty massive, really, for us. If you think about the dry matter that we're producing extra just through grazing management, with no reseeding costs and yeah, no other costs in a single strand of electric fence, it's quite phenomenal what the potential of these systems are, I think, going forward. And I think the other thing is, like, especially when you look around our area around here, the potential of some of this ground, which is deemed as lesser, poorer ground, more marginal ground, which has been traditionally sort of stratified, part of the stratified sheep system, hill flocks have used. To me now, when you look at it, you just think that the cow places now. And I think, you know, historically we've looked at hill sheep having very, very poor returns, you know, and I really do think there's huge potential to put a profitable beef herd onto some of these places now. It may mean the sheep move on or there's less sheep, but there's definitely huge potential, untapped potential, I would say, on some of this ground. So yeah, as far as lessons learned over the years and this year and last year, which was particularly challenging, as which Nikki alluded to. I think for us, with the staff that we've had working for us over the time and everything like that, they are the important part about outwintering cows. You know, if you have a cow in a shed and you tell somebody that they need so many bales of silage per week and just to bed them and do that, then, you know, pretty much anybody can do that. I think when you're outwintering cows, you need people who are prepared to take an interest in the cow and in the animals themselves. And there needs to be time spent just observing and just looking at them, you know, because they will tell you most things. And you know, if a cow's got a full belly and she's got water, then they can look after themselves. But there are indicators about outwintering cow, indicators that you get when you're outwintering cows if they're not content, that you need to be aware of, that either that they're not getting enough food or something's wrong. So yeah, observation's massive. And I would much prefer to pay somebody to just spend quarter of an hour, 20 minutes just looking at cows than rushing off to the next job, because yeah, it's really important. I think as well, when you're starting with it, if you're starting fresh out in the system, be prepared to remove cows from it who aren't coping with it, because not every cow type will cope with it. And I think if you've just made this hard line decision that them cows is going to be spending all winter outside, no matter what, then you can run into trouble. So be aware that it's not going to suit every animal and every cow until you get your herd where you want it to be, and that takes time. I think the other thing is always have a plan B or C. Much like Stu was talking about, I think it's important to know where you're going and know where you're grazing in the winter, to say that if you are in a run of good weather, then stay away from them places that you might need through the winter for the bad. I think that's really sound advice. You know, to us, we might look at cows on a bad day and think they're okay, they're fine, you know. But that doesn't mean that the people who are driving past or the walkers who are going past will always think that either. Like, and we've got to be aware of public perception. And outwintering has got such a bad name for itself over the decades that it's been tried to be done. And granted, on different systems to the ones that we're talking about tonight. But I know in our area around here, there is a lot of, if you were to listen to it, there would be a lot of peer pressure from farmers in particular about how disastrous and how awful sometimes outwintering can look. So yeah, you've got to just be aware of that. I would say that, you know, it has to also look okay. Yeah, so I would say that's my key bits from it. A lot of it's been covered by Nikki and Stuart. So I'll leave it at that. Questions?
That's spot on. Thank you, Chris. Stu, are you happy to run us through the questions?
Yeah, we'll work through those now. So yeah, we'll work through these questions now, and we can all throw our 2 pence in whenever we think it's direct and right. We'll start off with the questions coming down the side here. A lot of them obviously get my slides to work, so I apologise for that again. Probably didn't make much sense about that now. But we'll jump straight in with the most, that's not the right one, sorry. Could you discuss if you experienced any severe weight loss during outwintering? And if so, have you been able to make those losses up come spring? I think that comes from Philip there. Does anyone want to tackle that one first?
I can, yeah, I'm happy to jump on that one. I guess from our perspective, we have We have got some heifers and cows that have lost condition over the winter. So not thinking about our finishing animals, but our breeding herd. And it's something that we keep an eye on. But for us, it's part of that selection decision. So we want animals, we've got, you know, very clear kind of list of things that cows have to be able to do in order to stay in the herd. And maintaining body condition over winter actually isn't right up there. It's kind of, if she can do all the other things, but she runs a bit thin over the winter, but she still is able to do all of those things, then we're not too worried. And what we see is that like amazing compensatory gain come the grass. Like as soon as the grass starts growing, they just look amazing and they really bounce back. And I'd say that we don't see any issues with our young stock, although we have contract grazed for other people in the past, and we've had people send their cattle to us for winter. And yeah, sometimes they've kind of stood still, but you know, they sent them to us knowing that it was a very low input, just being moved daily with a bit of hay. So it wasn't an expectation, you know, there wasn't an expectation that it would really be growing. I would say it's more about sort of standing still as opposed to going backwards over winter. But yeah, always see amazing responses in the spring. I don't know, Gus, Stu, if you see similar things.
Yeah, I think if we look at a ruminant and what it's, you know, we're meant to be coming out of the summer in really, really good condition and then probably be prepared to lose condition through the winter. That's what ruminants do. I think where you've got to be careful is that you're not trying to ask them to do things at the wrong time of year. So in our situation, outwintering all year, we need to be very careful of our calving date and you know, allow the cows time to get themselves so that when they calve, they're hitting pasture and hitting grass growth. If they're calving, our system wouldn't suit calving much earlier than when we do now, because we'd be asking too much of the cows to perform off, you know, limited quantities of pasture and poor quality. So yeah, I think you've just got to be aware of your season and yeah.
I think the only thing that I would add to that is that we need to be super aware about what stock classes we're actually asking to do what through the winter, because obviously I think Nikki and Angus and I are all talking about dry cows here. You know, the idea that we might put some, oh sorry, Nikki's going to shake her head, sorry. We're talking, I guess we're not talking about feeding cattle, shall we say, then, you know, finishing cattle at the minute. Nikki, carry on, just stop shaking my head and you carry on. Jump in here, go on.
Well, yeah, all of ours are like, this is the system, you thrive or you don't stay. And so, yeah, which is a real privileged position to be in. And that's what the great thing about being a new entrant is, that you can set out your system and you select cattle that suit that system. And you're not having to inherit a bunch of genetics that have been used to a very different system. So there is a real privilege in being a new entrant and being able to do that. All of our animals, and basically we just keep them all in one group. Like everything is just treated the same. We don't wean. So we've got lactating cows just on hay with calves. It's the cheapest way for us to keep calves over the winter. And I know it's not for everyone, and I'm not suggesting that everyone should go and do this, but for us, what we've really found is that people tell us you can't do that with that stock class, and we do it anyway because we don't really have a choice, and then it just sort of works. And the animals that don't thrive, as I said, aren't the ones that sort of, those genetics don't stay in the system. So, but that's a real, you know, as I said, that's a real privileged position to be in.
What I need to say there is to definitely reword what I said there and say that if we're going to do this, let's make sure we've got the right genetics for doing it, which Nikki's obviously developed over years. But if someone's sitting there with a herd of Charolais cross or Limousin cross cattle that have no genetic sort of epigenetics that have been built up to allow us to do this, the chances are they're not going to thrive in this circumstance. So maybe what I should say is we should be really selective about the cattle that we ask to do this off. Is probably the best way of doing it. And Nikki's obviously had the right to sort of push through that and has the genetics that allows their system to thrive like that. On that as well, we touched on breeds there a little bit there. And I think, Nikki, you sort of touched on it really nicely in yours. That, I mean, I was very obsessed with certain breeds when we started doing cattle, but I think actually I've gone full circle very much now to it doesn't really matter what the breed is. It's whether that individual cow can suit the system or not. I'm assuming you two have both got a little bit to add to that if you're nodding your heads there, but I think that's super important to make sure that what we have actually suits the system, irrespective of whatever it is. That's the key, really.
Yeah, I think it's a given. Yeah, you've got the genetics have got to be right, and probably type for us rather as breed. I mean, we are predominantly an Angus herd with a little bit of Hereford in it, but yeah, there's such a variation within each breed, more variation within each breed than there is within different breeds. So yeah, just for us, type. Yeah.
So the next question here is coming from Matthew, asking about densities per hectare on paddock, how many cows per hectare, say. Anyone want to jump in there with what their sort of densities they're running at? And obviously it's very context based, but it would be interesting to hear what you guys are running at.
Yeah, I can talk a bit about our stocking rate and then our stocking density, because obviously those two things are a bit different. So just in case I'm sure you all know this, but if you didn't, the stocking rate is about the whole platform. So like you're across the year, how many animals per hectare or livestock units per hectare you have across the platform for the whole year. And the stocking density is, how many livestock units per hectare you have on a particular day, like in a paddock, for example. So for us, we run... I'll talk about the two systems, not the one that we've just moved to, but the two that we've been managing for a few years up until now. One of them we run at 0.4 livestock units per hectare, the other at 0.26. The average in our area is 0.256. So we run slightly above and above the average in our area, bearing in mind that our animals are out all year round. So in our area, the average wouldn't account for the fact that those animals are housed for probably 6 months of the year with a lot of bought in feed. So yeah, I'm really proud that we're able to kind of match or even go above average locally. I think that for us, it's about kind of moving those animals and keeping them moving. And that's kind of what we're doing on a daily. That's our stocking rate across the whole platform, and then per day, it's probably. I don't know, it'll be something like 69 livestock units per hectare, because they're just on these kind of small paddocks that we're then moving them. However, as I said, this winter, we've definitely been moving animals less frequently. So it'll probably be closer to, I don't know, maybe 15 livestock units per hectare for a good few days, maybe with a bale or two chopped in after a few days they've been in there. So yeah, we're definitely becoming more relaxed about that over the winter for sure.
Yeah, no, I suppose again it's context. So everybody's farm's really different. We are probably running at about 0.8 now, but that's a mix of all land types on the ground that we farm livestock units. But it's a similar situation to Nikki. We're not buying in any acres. There's nothing comes in a bag. There's no fert on the farm's organic, so there's no fert and no concentrate feeding. So yeah, it's purely off forage. So you have to bear that in mind when you're comparing different livestock stocking densities when people talk about it. As far as winter stocking density goes, we're probably taking more forage off than what Nikki is off that particular hectare. Grazing it out more. Again, it depends on weather conditions as to how much actual utilizable dry matter you're getting. But if you're a weaned cow in the winter, so a dry cow in the winter is probably eating 2% of her body weight, but maybe slightly under that a day in dry matter. So we're probably looking at, in the winter on the fell ground, 100 cows to a hectare. They're probably in 2 to 3 hectare blocks, but moved every day, 2 days or 3 days, and it depends on the terrain as to how easy the fences are to put up. And again, it's quite a variable sward quality across the fells. So sometimes you come into some particularly wet, rashy ground, which is not very good, and you just have to move them on faster, and then you'll come to some nicer stuff. And that again comes back to the people who are managing that grazing for you. Yeah, have to have faith that they're going to be able to judge what's in front of them. And if you're on a scalper ground like that, it varies so much from one end of the veld to the other that, But in general, there's 120 hectare fell, and we would think it would do 100 cows for 120 days. We're eking more out of it this year than last year. That's probably because of the way we grazed it last year and the drier weather. So yeah.
think that's really good and clear that was sort of highlighted there, that it's so variable and context based, and you know, we're looking at it and observing the whole time, and it can fluctuate depending on where they're going, and you know, it's up and down the whole time. So the idea we're going to have a set stocking is very difficult to sort of put a number on that, because it does fluctuate so much. What I would like to sort of go into a little bit more when we're on this is sort of the rest periods that you guys are sort of, you know, I sort of touched on mine, that, you know, I like to shut up in sort of June, July if possible, to get onto these grazing bits. And I think we need to sort of hammer home that little bit, that we're looking for really lignified, you know, grasses that are going to carry cattle through the winter. So do you want to touch a bit more on your rest periods, bit, guys, just in how you try and sort of make sure that you get enough built up ahead of yourself?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of places that we only graze in the winter, well, from autumn onwards, and they're really species rich, like lovely hillsides in the summer. So we really leave them during the growing season, and they're like really diverse, really beautiful bits of ground. And that means that they're, you know, totally sort of given over to all the wildlife and breeding ground nesting birds and breeding mammals and things. So it's, yeah, it kind of works as part of our system. Other places we probably would be doing is at least 6 months kind of rest before, you know, if it's not a 12-month, it will be a 6-month. We don't really like anything less than that unless we're in a bit of a bind, and then we might feed hay somewhere where they've been on maybe 4 months rest, but that's really rare. I mean, that would be like, because we work as graziers, we don't have fixed ground, or haven't had up until now. It's been, you know, we're working with different landowners at different times, so which is why we always try and run a bit understocked to allow for a bit of fudge factor. But really, yeah, if you can find, there's some really great examples of folk. I'm just thinking of Stuart and Giles Henry in the Borders, like they've got a beautiful bit of hill ground that, yeah, they literally only put them on it in the autumn and winter, and like us, it's full of beautiful species rich grasslands and orchids and stuff all summer. So and that's really, a lot of people visit that locally. So again, it's that kind of bit around, you know, Gus has talked about this as well, like how other people see it and how people perceive your system, and it's that additional kind of public good that comes from the big long rest periods. It's not just for the cattle, but other people can enjoy those landscapes as well.
Yeah, I agree with Nikki on that one. I would say that if I'm speaking now specifically about our winter grazing platform here, rather as the rest of the farm where we're finishing the cattle and running the sheep. So the fell will predominantly get grazed out in the winter. Once we may skim through it again early summer, just to graze it up a bit, you know, try at the minute we're still trying to encourage, you know, like the yield to increase off that fell, because it being very traditionally set stocked sheep fell. So yeah, I mean, I would say it's almost always shut up by July, end of July. In this last spring, because of the conditions, we were running short of suitable areas for cattle at all. So we skimmed through it again in June, because it was pretty robust. Now, this winter we've got more grass on it. Whether it was because of that or not, I don't know. But yeah, I wouldn't be worried about skimming through it early summer again. Not too intensively, but yeah, we'll definitely always have it shut up by late July, August for this job, because it is. I mean, let's look at the cost of what it is. I mean, and we work on dry matter, pence per kilo a lot in our costings. You can move it from quite a ready, cheap, available source of food in the summer to something which is hugely, hugely valuable in the winter, if you look at what the alternative wintering costs are. So when you go about how many times are you grazing it, the fact that you're feeding so much stuff from it in the winter raises its value to that of the equivalent what you would have to feed that cow inside, which will be 3 times what that grass cost you, more, you know. So we are not grazing it a lot. So you would say that we're not getting the awful use of it, but what we are grazing it at the optimum time, the prime time for it to be its most valuable product on the farm. And that's the thing that I think sometimes people misunderstand about rest, like leaving it rested so long. All the time that you're grazing it in the winter, it's a much more valuable product to your bottom line than what it is grazing it through the summer.
A great point, that, Angus. Thanks very much for pointing that out there, because I think that, like you say, some people don't necessarily sort of jump onto that. I'm going to rattle through some questions here because I noticed that we're not even halfway down and we're running out of time here. So water trough systems here. Does anyone want to talk about theirs? I'll run through mine briefly. Mine is very much a standard water trough on a wooden sledge that I made myself that I can drag around on the back of the quad. It pretty much pulls around from paddock to paddock, cell to cell. And I just have risers up every which is water pipe coming up out the ground every 150 meters or so. And that's my simple sort of system to try and keep the water and make sure that we're not trailing back and forwards across. Does anyone else want to? I mean, we saw Nikki's before the constant flow trough, which is great. But if you've got anything else to add to that, guys, that would be quite interesting to hear.
Yeah, well, we're running two of the Brewster Lads troughs. Now the 600-litre ones with a central float in the middle with an extra flow. So through the summer as well, anybody who's running cows know what peak demand can be like if you've got a lot of cows and calves in the summer, and it's just amazing what cows need to drink. So yeah, we're running two of them, and then we'll also have some of the pasture check drag troughs as well. Yeah, it's really crucial, and we haven't got it right yet. It's constant development, the water systems, just to be able to put cow numbers up and put mob numbers up. So yeah, it's constantly learning.
I'd say it's really worth investing in that. Like if you're going to invest in I was once told, like, don't invest in things that need a key, only invest in things that have legs or come on reels. So like water pipe and electric fence wire. So yeah, I feel like, I mean, we're just moving to this new site. We've got a lot of ground and the water is really not great, but there are some locks right up, like lock-ins up in the hill. So looking at, are there ways that we can the river? So obviously during the summer it's easy, we can pump out of the river fairly simply, and there's a few burns that we can run gravity fed systems through. But yeah, always trying to be a bit creative and kind of recognize that if you are going to invest in water, it really allows you to build your numbers, as Gus said, and really have increase and growth in the business just from something as seems innocuous and as simple as just getting your water system right.
Nikki, you've got a question here about your bale grazing and the end bale grazing. Do you want to sort of touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we were doing end bale grazing where we had bales to feed. We had a little bull group that we were when we were out wintering bulls a few years ago, and we didn't want to roll the bale out because they were just like sleeping on it and crapping on it, and then like it would get wet and they would just sort of so we decided we'd just leave them on end, and they just kind of come and eat them from the outside in. And we had really, really, really good results from that in terms of the animals can use them for shelter, so they can get around all sides of them if the weather's bad. So that's really good. They can kind of tuck in behind. I mean, just using inspiration from Canada, really looking at the big bale pods that you'd see in North America and Canada. And it just, you do get a bit more residual, but the response afterwards, like that following summer, and we can still look at hills now and you can see big fat circles all across them where the grass is greener. It's more diverse where those bales were sitting. So yeah, I think you just kind of have to get over the fear of like having a bit of grass, having a bit of hay left on the ground. And if you really, I mean, we never harrow anything or like do anything with it, but if you get really stressed, I guess you could do that, and you could like knock it about a bit so you were feeling better about it if you wanted to, because I appreciate that for some people looking at someone like that can really stress them out. So if you do have a bit left, you can just maybe harrow it or something.
I'll just add a bit. I mean, we similar to Nikki on that one, we don't unroll any bales. We'll have pods of 200. I think we're up to 260 bales in a field this year. And we don't unroll any of them. Allocate 2 days worth. We'll be grazing on this sort of pasture because it's quite good ground. We'll be taking more off the pasture than what Nikki will be. So yeah, we don't. There's no residual hay really left with the system that we're running. But like I say, we just take the net off and let the bale flop back down again onto its rounds, and they just come in from the sides and call them out. So we've never really unrolled bales.
Great. A quick question here about what soil types are all three on. So maybe we could just say what soil type and the annual rainfall, just for people's reference there. Just to, I think you both mentioned it, but we'll just clarify that point here. I am on a bit of everything. I run from sand and gravel at the river right up to some sort of heavy loamy clay up on the top, with an annual rainfall of around 30 to 35 inches, although we had 66 last year, which was interesting. So yeah.
Yeah, similar rainfall to Stu and similar to last year, very similar conditions. We do go down to the coconut, but again, up onto the top, quite quickly onto some heavy loamy ground. Like, I mean, Stu was at our place last week digging on some of the stuff at Disley, but it ain't all pretty. But yeah, that's the type of stuff that he's on about where you have to earn the right to winter on, and we certainly haven't done that there yet. But one day.
I think anyone ever gets there, Angus. It's just a it's a constant mission to keep going.
I do think that it's important that I've been onto a lot of our wintering spots throughout the country now, and rainfall is not. It's not the reason why you shouldn't try it. I mean, I've been in the lakes and in southwest Scotland on some really heavy rainfall farms who are coping without wintering and doing a really good job of it. And I think again, it's easy to just poo-poo it and say, "Oh, we have too much rain," and it ain't for everybody, but it can be for a lot of people.
I had to go away and work out what millimeters was to inches, because I'm obviously so much significantly younger that I'm working in metric. But so we're like about 30 inches, I think 31 inches, 800 mil of rain ish where we are. Soil type really varies from, we've got sandy bits, podzols is the majority. We've got peat, we've got clay, loam, you name it, we've got it somewhere on the ground that we're managing. So yeah, and that's just about thinking about that when we're managing over the winter. Where do we want to avoid? Where do we want to keep animals? I would say, just to touch on kind of grazing planning, this comes into this, like when we're doing our grazing plan for the year, and we do think about the plan for the whole year, although it's a moving, working document. You put all the stuff that you know that you want to avoid or go to, and then you fill in the gaps. And so I think, like, where do you want to be for calving? Where do you want to be for bulling? And we don't have sheep, so for us it's very much based around cattle, not sheep. But obviously same applies for sheep. Where do you want to be if the weather's really bad from the north? Where do you want to be if the weather's really bad from the east? Okay, if you're going to have to be there at that time of year, how do you need to graze the rest to make sure that you can create that rest? There's a question kind of asking about, well, how, what are you doing the rest of the year? But it's really about actively planning your grazing so that you can get that summer rotation to carry as many animals as possible through maybe a smaller area, so that you can shut off these other areas for winter. And I think thinking about carrying to your winter capacity, because otherwise if you're carrying to your summer capacity and it's costing you a hell of a lot just to get through the winter, you need to kind of work the numbers out. What's your cost of production if you reduce your stocking rate to your winter carrying rate? And actually, are you potentially making more money? And we know that there's some really nice examples where people have done that. They've looked at winter carrying capacity versus summer carrying capacity. And rather than try and carry the summer numbers through the winter, they carry the winter numbers, save a hell of a lot of money, and then maybe think about having other groups in during the summer on contract or on finishing groups or something else. So I think, yeah, it's an opportunity to be a bit creative, but you really, really need to know your numbers to be able to work those things out. Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent then, but we're running out of time and I wanted to get it in.
Don't worry. I'll jump to the next one since we've got a few more. Minerals wise, has anyone seen more demand when you're out wintering?
No, like we just use like Rocky's blocks, and yeah, some areas they'll go for them a bit more normally when it's wet, but yeah, not really something that we see a difference on.
No, certainly don't use any more. Probably, definitely, I would say less. They get very little free access stuff at all. A bit of iodine pre-calving. So yeah, nothing major.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I don't think you see any more in the winter than you will in the summer in terms of demand. I think it fluctuates throughout the year, and I think more relevant is the type of cattle that you've got on there. I think there's some certain cattle are more predisposed to wanting different types of minerals, and it's finding that cattle again, like we talked on before, that suit that system. Angus, there's a great question here for you, which I'm not sure you're going to answer in the short space of time, but can you explain the cattle finishing system you're using? Are they growing and finishing cattle also outside in the winter, and what do they eat, and are they supplemented?
Okay, so quickly go through that. At weaning time, the steer calves come inside and are a pretty conventional type of winter on a silage ration. They then go for as early a turnout as possible, and grow, and we'll try and fatten what we can at 18 to 20 months off grass, and the rest will be sold store prior to the next winter. So we'll never keep any of the R2s, the rising 2-year-old cattle, steer wise through the next winter. We'll get rid of them prior to that. Now, yeah, I would have normally looked at probably 60% killed. Last year we didn't get that, and I cashed them in quick. Probably got about 30% killed at 18 months. Don't go for heavy weights. We'll just make sure that fat class. So yeah, probably 280 kilos. If we are killing them, 280, 300. And yeah, I think the important thing in the costings show, because like we do a lot of cost analysis, that it's important for us to get rid of them before the next winter. As far as the heifer calves are all outwintered as well. They're outwintered on deferred grass and silage bale grazing. So, and a system quite similar to the MAMs, but slightly better quality food. And yeah, we bull a lot of heifers, more than we need, but for a short period of time. And yeah, just kill or sell store what isn't in calf. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. We've touched on this one already as well, but we'll touch on it again. How tight do you graze your standing hay? Now, I like to sort of try and, 50% graze is what I'm aiming for, but obviously telling cattle to do that in a very wet winter's day is very difficult. So often you see a lot more plunged in and stuff like that, which I'm very comfortable with. But do you guys have I know, Angus, you're talking about you take it a bit lower, and it'll be interesting to hear sort of, do you have a set amount you're looking for, or do you just kind of go with it until you think they're ready to go on?
Yeah, so room and fill. I'll quite happily, if the ground conditions are good, is let them take it quite low. But again, if we're looking at saying there's 3,500 kilograms of dry matter available on that hectare, that means I'm going to feed 100 600 plus kilo cows on that variety. They're going to take 12 to 1,500 kilograms, and it's probably quite difficult to get them to take much more than that really in the winter. So that's still only 50% really of that cover, so yeah, I think you've just got to be wary that you haven't got to make them work really, really hard in the winter. Otherwise you start and get empty rumens, and you do not want that. You need them full. So they need to be able to get a pretty easily accessible bite of food if they're just on stockpile. That's why hay, when you're adding hay, like, it's an easy bite for them, it's an easy fill for them. But we don't do that all year. We try and get them to eat as much grass as we possibly can. So yeah, room and fill is the kiddie. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd say this is
Nikki comes on.
Well, I was going to say this is a point of debate in our business between me and James about how hard they take it down. And I think, yeah, it really depends, because we're working with different landowners. You have different requirements. So if we're on way to graze grassland, we'll probably take it down a bit harder than if we're somewhere where we don't want to create that much disturbance. So it really is, context is key. And it just really, really depends. What's interesting, where we've taken it down harder in the summer, and there's been a few places where we've been playing around with different stocking densities and different levels of utilization. Take it down really hard, it comes back really green, and you think, well, that looks good, and then it just melts so much more in the winter. So actually what we're finding is that reducing the utilization, doing quite a lot of skim grazing, and particularly in the early part of the growing season, and yeah, just kind of not always taking stuff down, but being able to do that if we need to. So I think, yeah, it is just that thing. It's an amazing thing about electric fence. You can use it to kind of create the animals up a bit, or creating that level of trampling or utilization. So yeah, definitely I think we're probably somewhere maybe between the two of you in terms of what we're taking, but it's really dependent on the context.
Super. I'm very aware it's 8:30 now, Max. Do you want us to wrap this up?
Maybe one more question before we bring it to a close.
Okay, there's one here
I'll
from
keep
Bill.
going. I love it. It's like my favorite topic, so I'll be here till midnight just rabbiting on.
There's one here from Bill about the herb and legume content of the winter pastures. Is it lower there than they are in the summer in fields, say? And if so, do you think it's because the grasses are able to grow thicker and ranker, which smothers the less competitive forbs out? You want to go with that first?
I mean, we just don't find that, and I sort of said that to Bill in the chat. Like the most diverse places, are the ones that are that we graze in winter, so they have all summer to do their amazing flowering thing. Those are the most diverse areas. So this is a debate we could get into, kind of about ideas around grass or soil fertility, or quite often we think places are more or less fertile, but often the things we're testing, we're only able to test what we can test with the tests that we have. So we're not always able to really understand what's going on in the soils or those biological or mycorrhizal relationships that are happening. So yeah, it's just not something that's an issue for us. We have good diversity across the platform.
There's a touch on Coxfoot and Timothy there. Nikki just aimed at us, I think, from Bill there. Do you want to respond to that at all, or are you happy with?
Yeah, I mean, we have loads of Coxfoot, loads of Timothy, lots of fescues, lots of tufted hairgrass, as I shared in the picture, and those areas are also really, really diverse in different patches. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just about constant observation and looking at what's happening. What we're seeing is an increase in diversity because of the way that we're grazing. I'm a huge fan of Coxfoot. I think it's phenomenal grass, particularly in the winter. It just does such a good job for us and keeps our cattle so well. So yeah, for me, it's about having good diversity, and I think it's about managing for the ecosystem function rather than trying to aim for just one particular plant or one particular outcome, and trying to have a bit more of a holistic view and not be too impatient and give things time to to develop.
I think coming from a really conventional type of farming background, the ryegrasses and white clover mixes that we used a lot of in the past, and definitely a lot of people will use, they are not terribly well suited to outwintering. And we've got to be a lot more selective in how, if we are establishing grassland, what sort of species we're putting in there. Let's try and utilize some of these herbal layers and put these more, like, as Nikki's just touched on there, the Timothys and the Coxfoots that my dad has not a fan of these for many years, but we are, we were putting a lot of ryegrass in, but then seeing how much they can improve the land and also winter the cattle far better, these older species. We are utilizing a lot more of these species, and we are laying down grasses nowadays to try and make the most of these grasses that are naturally better at doing it. Ryegrass is a bit of a guilty one for lying down and going sort of sticky and slimy. So it's a really sort of balancing act when we do start going into this, to try and utilize the grasses that we've got, but try and sort of steer ourselves into the more diverse grasses that are suited to this. Like Nikki said, we could waffle on about this all night, but it is now 33 minutes past, so we should probably bring this to a close. Thanks everyone for being here. Matt, you can sign everyone out here.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, thank you all for such an interesting discussion, and thank you for everybody who attended, and all the best with lambing and calving over the next few weeks. So thanks again to the panel. Thanks all for joining, and we'll see you next time.